Thank you, Snail. Now I'd like to bring up the second speaker for the opposition, Lee Jia Wei.
You guys all hear me? Yeah. I often find I sound like slightly, prohibitively sexy over the microphone. But anyway, just self-aggrandizement for a little bit. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, honorable opponents, my teammates obviously, and honorable panel, very good evening indeed. The grass is always greener on the other side, they say. What we need to demonstrate, I think, first of all, and what I'm going to try to show, is this is not quite so good an idea for French millionaires, right? And I like to think about how it would feel to be like a French millionaire. Some of you may not, you might actually be. I have no idea. Let's think firstly about whether or not it's culturally appropriate. Would your standard of living improve? And honestly, your standard of living seems fairly awesome in Paris or in France, right? Your people are gorgeous, your country is gorgeous. Grant, your metro smells a bit like pee, but let's compare this. Let's compare this all with England, all right? England is a country where alcohol creates more people than it kills. It's a country where people, resemble slightly pugnacious racist goblins, where, with apologies to my English friends, where civil servants in the country are like North Korean missiles. They don't work and they can't be fired. If chicken tikka masala is your only reason for moving to England, then I'm sorry, it's the pinnacle of English cuisine, this bowl of unspicy filth that smells a little bit like a rotting sock. Honestly, the worst problem, I think, in England, and this is in direct response to all they've told us about conflict and stress that the French people will rise up in revolution, is simply that it's much worse in England. Why? Because England is a class-obsessed country. Think about it. Income inequality between the poorest municipality in England and the richest is 10 to 1. For some perspective, in China, no thanks ma'am, it's 6 to 1. That's a real problem for us, isn't it? Because class rifts in England are terrible. They're massive. Just take a look at the sort of backlash after Margaret Thatcher died. In fact, she's probably the only person, or the only thing, no thank you madam, that English people hate more than French people. In fact, there are two particular reasons why the cultural backlash that is going to emerge from French millionaires moving to England is going to be terrible. No thank you, sir. Firstly, most of the rich people, and probably most of the rich French millionaires who move over, are going to be bankers, people who luxuriate around trading money and not doing anything real. In contrast to French people who often own factories, for example, that are much closer to people's hearts, there is a great alienation from the public. No thanks, sir. But more importantly, you're not just an elitist in England, you are a foreign French elitist. Mind you, if anyone's going to get angry at someone, it would be French millionaires moving to England. No, thank you, madam. Let's have some perspective on this, right? Let's think about actual empirical examples. If you want an example of a country that is genuinely violent and slightly insane, look no further than England, where people start rioting and robbing shops along London and Oxford Street on a whim. It's where attending a football match is like watching a gladiator at a coliseum, except slightly more alcoholic. Hang on a moment there. It's also a country where you're more likely to get shot in South London or Slough than anywhere in France. Please, sir.
How is anything that you can say about the situation in England be worse than the actual prospect of terror and revolution?
Well, no, I'm saying terror and revolution is a lot more likely to happen in England, and the backlash will be far worse because, unfortunately, English people tend to, 1, hate French millionaires more, and 2, be a little bit more violent, I suppose, than French people. This is all getting a little bit racist, but it's fine since I'm from the English team. Let's think about Mr. Hollande for a little while, shall we? I mean, I don't particularly like the man, as it seems most of you don't, but they're more likely to keep him in power. Why? Because instead of his policies being self-evidently an economic disaster and the French people realizing that, all he's going to do in the media is blame the French millionaires. If our country is in economic ruin, it's because of those millionaires who ditched you and left you alone and refused to pay their 75% tax. No, thank you, sir and ma'am. You distract politics away from the actual issue at hand, which is that some policies don't quite work and keep someone whom all of you evidently don't quite like in power. And honestly, that's counterproductive to the point that you intend to pursue. Let's think about financial perspectives, shall we, very quickly. If you intend to enjoy a lower tax rate in England, that's not going to happen. Because, effectively, if your salary is taxed, the effective tax rate is quite different from the marginal tax rate. A French person's marginal tax rate starts at 1 million, so you only get taxed at 75% beyond that 1 million mark, which means the effective tax rate is not 75%, it's about 51% by mathematical calculation. in England, since the marginal tax rate for, at the top level starts at around £140,000, your effective tax rate, supposing that you're maybe a millionaire, is 55.7%. So honestly, you don't save a great deal. And in fact, one would argue that England is in a far worse economic state than France. Why is that? Because England can't export. Mrs. Margaret Thatcher decided to destroy most of England's industry and privatize the vast majority of it, which is why England tends to outsource, for example, its power utilities to Germany or to France. So whereas your country can export its way out of this crisis, England can't. It relies on its banking sector, which is currently in peril. Why? Because Mr. David Cameron is going a little bit nuts. He's saying, well, guys, let's publicly disavow the EU. Let's hold a referendum on EU membership, which, again, threatens the position of London as the primary financial node and access from international markets into the European market. I am terribly, terribly proud to propose, because one, it's terrible for French millionaires, and two, it's, again, terrible for French millionaires. Thank you very much.